The American-Iranian Council presents AIC Through the Ages.
I notice that in the charge for all of us speaking in this segment, the word better relations appears, which suggests that that's what we're supposed to be doing. That isn't always so easy, and it implies a certain predilection in one direction. I don't myself anticipate any transcendental experience that is going to transform the relationship between the United States and Iran. This sort of single bullet idea, and I thought that Shao Bakash's comment that just being a little nicer to Iran is somehow going to resolve all of the problems is just, it is nonsense. There is a difficult array of issues, and what I would like to do is very modest and very practical, actually. Starting with the idea that perhaps there might be discussions between Iran and the United States, that there might be some will on either side. Just what would we talk about? What would the two governments actually talk about? And I would like to simply give you a very brief kind of my idea of an agenda. This is not intended to be comprehensive. It certainly isn't intended to be a comprehensive discussion of any one of the issues. In many cases, there are people here who know more about any one of these specific issues than I do, but let me at least give you my list, and it would give us something to sort of, you can shoot at me later or at others, depending on what you think of the whole situation. The first point, and these are in not any particular order at all, I don't think there is an order, but these are subjects that I think are legitimate and could come up. First, I think the negotiations at The Hague have been perhaps more of a success story than we have given them credit for. There has been a very large number of issues resolved, which will have cleared away a lot of underbrush for any kind of serious talks once we get to that point. Those talks have, in fact, been very favorable to the United States. My understanding is that payments to U.S. companies have been around $2 billion, and payments to Iran in terms of claims won is about half that amount. There are some claims remaining, but the military claims are the most difficult ones that are remaining between the two, and there the two sides are very far apart. But on the whole, a lot of underbrush has been cleared, and it seems to me that there's grounds for more progress. I would argue myself for more linkage, if you like, on the Hague Tribunal than we have had, political linkage, in the sense of these things being seen as part of a totality of a package, rather than as this little isolated thing that's going on over here according to its own rhythm, and it gets ignored for any kind of political purposes. Somehow it's considered to be illegitimate to think of it in political terms. I think that's not true. My second point in this agenda is the nuclear question. I take the Iranian apparent buildup and attempt to build a nuclear capability, I take it very, very seriously. From all the evidence that I've seen, it looks as if Iran is making a major play in that direction. However, I believe it's in quite early stages, and that means that there is room for maneuver on both sides if there is any goodwill, and there is something there then to talk about. I think that since it is in the early stages, that some kind of a discussion of a classic non-proliferation nature, which involves potentially a mix of sanctions, incentives, export controls, intrusive IAEA inspections of Iranian facilities, negotiations, and security assurances from both sides would be a basis for discussion. And I can't specify what that would turn out, but I don't think it's too late to begin that process, and it certainly is an issue. Third item is Mr. Rushdie. I think the West cannot ignore Mr. Rushdi's fate. I realize why Iran finds it very difficult to deal with this. Hushang suggested that, in fact, there was some indication of movement on that side. I would argue for something very, very tangible. That is, I think it would be within the capacity of the Iranian government to convince so-called Ayatollah Saneh and his 15th Khordad group to simply eliminate the bounty. It's one thing to say we aren't going to accept any turn down of the Ayatollah's fatwa. It's another thing to say that we're going to let our own people, in one form or another, offer a bounty of $2 million plus expenses for anybody who kills this man. That is, it seems to me, quite a different matter, and it seems to me that would make a very major step in that direction. Again, I think it's something we can seriously talk about. On the question of arms, I would argue for restraint. As several speakers have noted, Hushan mentioned just a second ago, Iran's military budget is estimated to be $10 billion over the next 5 years, $2 billion a year over the next 5 years. I remind you, which is quite obvious, that the United States, since the end of the Gulf War, has in fact sold itself, not counting any of the other Western powers or anyone else, has itself sold twice that amount to the Gulf states alone. And that does not include, by the way, the F-15 deal, which is another $9 billion, which is roughly equivalent to the entire Iranian budget for the next 5 years. I think we have to put that in perspective. The submarines, again, are indeed something that I think need to be taken seriously, but since Iran has absolutely no experience in undersea warfare, they've got one sub, newly delivered, 2 more supposedly on the way. I do not see this as a major threat to U.S. naval operations. Of course, you can't operate in the Gulf anyway, but just outside the Gulf, I do not see this. I see this as a show the flag operation, very much in the same line that the Shah had, that he wanted to have an Indian Ocean, ocean-going Navy that would be taken seriously, and I see this as very much the same. It seems to me, again, there is a basis here for discussion in terms of what the buildup should be, what is fair and what is not fair. With regard to some kind, another item on the agenda, it seems to me, should be some kind of regional security structure. This may be overly ambitious, but I notice that in Article 8 of Resolution 598, the one that ended the Iran-Iraq War, it does call for the United Nations to undertake such efforts. It seems to me this wouldn't be a bad moment with Iraq sort of at least momentarily reduced as a major threat to its neighbors at least, if not to its own people, or not to the overflights necessarily, that this might not be a bad moment for the UN to actually dust that off and begin to think about whether something concrete can be done in that way, and I would certainly argue for the United States supporting such an effort. It would have to be very slow. You wouldn't expect any extraordinary results immediately, but it seems to me that it's one of the little arrows in the quiver that has been ignored and that shouldn't be ignored. The question of political violence. Iran, it seems to me, at this stage, we can say with some degree of confidence, though never entire full confidence, that the sort of classic era of terrorist operations, hostage-taking, aircraft bombings, and the like, seems to have stopped. So at least in that sense, there has been a genuine improvement. That may not hold, but at least it's there. We do have some fallout from that, however. The Pan Am 103 bombing is still very much an open question. There's new evidence that just appeared in the last few days that Iran may have in fact financed the bombing. That argument will go on and on. But at least on that sense, I think we can say that there's been some improvement, and I think Iran's arguments on that make some sense. On the other hand, you'd have what I would call not the classic terrorism, but rather political murders. And this has been referred to. By my count, we have had assassinations by Iran, probably by Iran, almost certainly by Iran or Iranian agents in France, Lebanon, Germany, Switzerland, and North Iraq in the last several years. These are political enemies who have been hunted down and assassinated. My reading of this, and this is strictly my own interpretation, is that this kind of assassination policy probably had its origins back in 1981 with the killing of all of the Iranian officials when the civil war really broke out. My guess is, and it really is nothing but a guess, that Iran at that time created an institution to retaliate for these kinds of things, to protect the regime, if you like, and that group has now acquired a sort of independence, that it's not under anybody's control. I have no doubt in my own mind that Rafsanjani probably knew about the Bakhtiar murder before it happened, but that he probably couldn't do anything about it, or didn't feel that he could do anything about it, because there is this kind of general license to kill that has been given to at least a small group, and it's a very potent group, and it's one that constantly embarrasses Iran in the international environment. If Iran is going to make improvement or expects to have better treatment, somebody is going to have to bring that operation under control. Central Asia. As far as I can tell, neither the United States nor Iran has any real policy in Central Asia, and maybe that provides a good starting point for a discussion. I was struck not long ago, I was at a speech being given by the Iranian ambassador to the UN, where he said rather plaintively, maybe perhaps self-servingly, that in the old days, the bad old days, Iran used to be able to look north, and there it saw one giant, essentially hostile state that was stable, and you could work out an arrangement with it. You could do business with the Soviet Union, even if you didn't like them and even if you didn't trust them. He said, we look north now, and we see at least 6 states, all of them completely unstable, and we worry about that a great deal. I think that's a legitimate point. I think the United States also looks at that area and sees a substantial amount of instability, and it seems to me that if, in fact, our interest is in stability in that region, and Iran's, as they have suggested, is also instability, maybe there's something there that people can talk about, and I would suggest that that would be worth pursuing. Oil. I don't think anybody believes that Iran is, in the near future or in the foreseeable future, going to try to cut off the oil to the rest of the world. Quite the contrary, they're trying to sell as much of it as they possibly can. They do want influence over the oil business, and their influence at present is limited, and it looks to me as if it's going to stay that way. As Hushang mentioned, American companies this past year surpassed Japan as a customer for Iranian oil. We are lifting, American ships and American chartered ships are lifting some 500,000 barrels a day of oil from Karg Island and elsewhere. Clearly, that has not been affected by anything. They can't bring the oil directly to the United States, but that doesn't seem to bother anybody. Iran is also importing a lot of American grain, and a large contract, a major new contract has just been done in the last few months. So there is business to be done, which always attracts people's attention also. There are a couple of cases pending at the International Court of Justice. Iran has brought a case against the United States this past November, calling for the United States to pay compensation for the destruction of the oil platforms that were hit by the American military during the Iran-Iraq War. And as many of you know, since 1989, there's been a case pending where Iran is seeking compensation for the Airbus shoot down in 1988. I'm not sure if there's any room for give on the two other sides, but it seems to me, again, that these are subjects that deserve consideration as at least a subject for discussion to clear up the air on both sides. The World Bank, the IMF, the United States has not vetoed a couple of major grants to Iran, one a $250 million grant some time ago for earthquake relief, and more recently $134 million for more development. Compensation regime that is seriously put into place with regard to the end of the Gulf War. That might be something that Iran would be quite interested in, and I assume that they would want to get their place in the queue. That's a sort of quick and dirty listing. Let me just close with a couple of words. Major revolutions are like earthquakes. They rearrange the landscape, and they're often visited by aftershocks long after the main event. We should not be surprised that Iran is a prickly, proud, and often infuriating country, nor should we expect it to reform suddenly and become a model world citizen. More turmoil may well be in store. I would certainly expect it. I'd be surprised. Still, by the standards of other revolutionary societies, Iran in the last 13 years has come a fair distance. Iran, it's important to be reminded, is not Saddam Hussein's Iraq. It is not a one-man dictatorship. It is, in fact, a much more pluralistic system that allows for a variety of expressions and where coalition politics is a very important aspect of everything that gets done. That means that perhaps there's no easy solution because of the diffusion of power. You can't do a deal quite as easily as you could with the Shah or even with Saddam Hussein. But nevertheless, it provides some opening, at least, it seems to me, for serious discussion. I guess I would share with Dick Murphy and with Dick Cottam, who in his initial remarks, a degree of melancholy about the situation. I see a situation of policy schizophrenia, certainly in Iran, but also to a considerable degree in the United States. There is immense historical baggage that are brought by both of these countries into any kind of contact at this point. I think there is popular hostility, perhaps greater in the United States than in Iran, but it's there nevertheless, and deep mutual suspicion. The threat that Dick Cottam pointed out of a spiral conflict is certainly there, and also the fact that both of these countries, Iran and the United States, both feel that they need to be the bastion against something. Iran has demonized the United States, and it still serves a useful rhetorical purpose, at least, in pumping up its own population and making a key point or arguing for unpopular policies. The United States has done the same on its side, especially as a result of the hostage crisis. There are bureaucratic tendencies, imperatives at work in both societies that tend to undercut any move that would do away with this old suspicion, with this old hostility, which has become very familiar, very useful, and from a bureaucratic point of view, very good for building empires. And that is something that I think will be very, very difficult to overcome. The real question is there the will? Is the will there to try to break this cycle? There are some small signals hanging out there, and I think that's why we're meeting here today, because we see enough signals that there's at least something to talk about. But I can't, in all honesty, see that those signals are great enough for us to have a celebration at this point. On the contrary, I think that the chances for major improvement in the immediate future are slim. You need a first step to get anywhere, and I'm very much in favor of that first step, but I would also argue that we shouldn't hold our breath. Thank you very much.
The American Iranian Council has been promoting dialogue and understanding between the U.S. and Iran since 1990. For more, visit us-iran.org.